Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning for the webinar, Email Testing for Success. My name is Jill, and I'm the Training and Education Manager here at Vertical Response. And today I'm going to take you through why you want to test your email and different aspects of your email that you can test. And part of testing your email involves splitting your list so that you can find out how successful your tests are. And I'm going to give you a quick demo of our segmentation tool so that you can understand how to split your lists in order to do some of the things that I'm going to cover today in the webinar. Just a couple things before I get started. First of all, the webinar will be about 45 minutes or so. At the end, there will be time for Q&A. So if you do think of some questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the GoToWebinar window, and I'll be more than happy to answer as many of those as I can at the end of the webinar. One of the questions that I get at pretty much every webinar, and if you've been to any of them, you already know what I'm going to say, but the question I get the most is this being recorded, or are these slides going to be available? And the answer is yes. I am recording the webinar, and I will post that on our help site next week. Well, let's see, next week has a big holiday in the middle of it, so I will probably do it earlier in the week. Monday or Tuesday, I'll probably have that up. And I'll also include the slide deck as well so that you can access this information later. There's lots of great testing information in here, so you'll probably want to reference this at a later date. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, these are the things that we're going to cover today. I am going to go through some of the basics of testing your lists and testing your emails and some of the things that you can test. Along the way, I have lots of real-life examples. Some of them come from our own marketing efforts. We do a lot of testing. If you receive our email marketing newsletter every week, the VR Buzz, you've been part of those tests, although you didn't know you were being tested on. I also have some examples from Ann Holland's Which Test Won. I don't know if any of you out there today are subscribed to that. If you're not, I would definitely recommend that you do that, and I have a slide at the end that will have the contact information for that. It's basically an email she sends out once a week with different testing, and you can test your own skills because you can try to figure out which one you think won, and then she'll tell you on the website. So it's great, and I have some of those examples here as well. So first of all, getting started with testing your email, you want to know what you want to test before you begin. And really, you want to have an idea of why you want to test in the first place. So really, the reason that you want to test your email, and again, there's various aspects of your email that you can test, but testing will give you an idea of what it is that your recipients like or what they want or even what they're most interested in. So by testing different parts of your email, you can find out where your recipients are most engaged and what makes them take the actions that you need them to take. So once you understand why you need to test your email, the different things that you can test along the way are things like click-through rates, open rates, or conversions, and those are the things we're going to touch on today. You can test some other parts of your email as well, things like the content, things like that. You can test the frequency of your emails. There's a lot of things you can test that has to do with your email. We're going to touch on most of the basic ones today. The point I have up here, have a benchmark to work with. You want to have an idea of where you're starting from. So if you've never sent an email through our system before, you've never sent out a marketing email before, you're not going to know what it is that you want to change. Now, I'm not saying that you can't test. You can certainly test and find out what your recipients like to click on or what the open rate is, but you're not going to know how successful that is without having some kind of a benchmark. So you're going to take a look at the emails that you've sent out already, see what your open rates are, for example, or what your click-through rates are, for example, and then you can use that as the starting point and then test your email to try to improve those numbers. You will always want to use a control email and then test something. Well, not always. You can do two different things, but generally you want to have what it is that you normally would send out versus what it is that you're going to be testing. So, if you send out a weekly newsletter and you want to start testing placement of the content in your email, for example, have what you normally send and then have something that's different. If you're testing buttons, have the button that you normally have and then test something different so that you have an idea of which one is playing better. You want to test only one thing at a time, and you'll have noticed in the examples that I gave you, I only mentioned one thing to test at a time. And the reason is that if you test more than one thing at a time, it's going to be difficult to know which is having the biggest impact on your success. So you could see a higher open rate, but if you're testing your from label and your subject line at the same time, you're not going to know which one is having the impact. If you have a higher click-through rate and you've changed the content, you've changed the layout of your email, and you've changed your buttons, then it's not going to be easy to know which one is having the biggest impact. So you want to test one thing at a time in your email and then find out what is successful and then start testing something else. And testing is something that you can do on an ongoing basis to find out what is the really successful part of your email and find out what your recipients are thinking. You also, and this might be obvious, but you also want to send your emails at the same time. So when you're splitting your list and you're sending out your control email and your test email, make sure they're going out at the same time. You have them scheduled to go at the same date and the same time. That way, the delivery isn't going to have an impact on what you're testing either. The only thing that you would make an exception to this is if you're testing the day of the week or the time of the day that you're sending your email. And then obviously you'd have to send them at different times. But if you're testing things like open rate or click-through rate, send the emails at the same time so that delivery doesn't have an impact on that. So once you decide what it is that you want to change in your email and what you want to test in your email, you're going to need to split your mailing list. And as I said, I will show you a demo at the end on how to do this using our segmentation tool. But splitting your list, you want to keep in mind that you need to have an accurate results. And so one of the things to think about is the size of your mailing list. The size of your list will definitely have an impact on the results that you get. Generally speaking, and again, this isn't written in stone, but generally speaking, you'll need to have a mailing list that's around 1,000 if you want to start doing splitting in order to have some accurate results. And again, you can do testing on a smaller list if you want to. If you have a list of 500, you can certainly split your list and do testing on a smaller list as well. The thing to keep in mind with a smaller list is a smaller sample on the list will have a bigger impact on your results. So you might see a higher open rate on one of your emails, but that could come down to 1 or 2 people. So the smaller your list is, the more impact the people on the mailing list are going to have on your results. So that's why generally you need to have at least 1,000 for it to be pretty accurate. Generally speaking, most people do what's called an A/B split test. And what that is splitting your list in half and then sending out the 2 different lists to the 2 different versions of your email. It's a random split, so you don't have any control or any impact on what's going to happen in the results. And our system has an easy way of doing this. You can also split your list in different ways. For example, if you wanted to test out a new from label or a different subject line, you could split your list 70-30. So 70% of your list would get the control email and 30% would get the test, and you can see which one has a different rate. You could also do something if you wanted to test the subject lines without impacting your entire list. You could split it by 80-10-10. So 10% of the list would get one subject line, 10% would get the other one. You would test it, find out which had the best results, and then you would send the 80% of the list the winner of that. So that is certainly another thing that you could do as well. The thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing testing for your email and your lists is that testing is going to work for your recipients only. So if you talk to friends or colleagues about results that you have in your emails, you have to remember that email mailing lists and emails are very specific to the people that are being sent to them. So your recipients will respond to different things in your email, and they will respond differently to things in somebody else's email. So I'm not saying you can't talk to people that you don't know, that you know about the testing on your emails, but if you're talking to somebody who works in a different industry and they have a different result when they're sending out their emails, they have a higher open rate or a higher click-through rate, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing something wrong. It just means that your recipients have a different interest in the email that you're sending to them or a different engagement. So that's one of the reasons you also want to do testing, is to find out what it is that your recipients respond to. It doesn't matter what other people's recipients respond to. You also want to do your testing more than once. You want to make sure that the results that you get are not some kind of a fluke or some random occurrence. So just make sure that you're sending out your tests a couple of times, and then if you see the similar results across your tests, then you know that's something that your recipients are responding to. It's not that Mercury's in retrograde and the internet went down or something like that. So that's one of the reasons you want to test a couple of times. Don't, I kind of covered this, don't test too many things at once or you're not going to know what is impacting. And don't divide your list by more than 2 or 3 because, again, you're going to start diluting your results because you're going to have a smaller pool to pull from. So we're going to start talking about some of the different things that you can test in your email. So probably one of the most popular things to test is the open rate. This is something that people have a great interest in. They follow as to show how successful their email campaign is. Open rate and click-through rate definitely show engagement. So some of the things that you can test to change your open rate to make it higher is definitely the subject line. That's probably the thing that gets tested the most. So you can test something like a long subject line versus a short subject line. Just as long as you know a long subject line could be truncated depending on what email client is rendering it. But if you know that your recipients are able to receive longer subject lines, then you can certainly test if they're more impactful than a shorter subject line. You can also test promotions and definitely test something as specific as 50% off versus half off. And this is something we've done with our own recipients in the past to find out what they respond to better, a % off or a dollar amount off. And for most of our recipients, it's usually telling them the dollar amount because that's easier to calculate than 50%. But some people might respond better to 50% versus half off. So I have some examples here. Living Social Deals, 50% off at Candy Bar, or Groupon, half off at Bombay Indian Restaurant. So you can test that type of wording in your subject line and see which wording works better for your recipients. You could personalize your subject line and see if having something that sounds a little more warm and friendly for your recipients cause your open rate to go up. So for example, you could have an email or a subject line that says, Jill, save 30% off this weekend. That makes me feel like you know who I am and that I'm going to really appreciate that sale. The one thing I would say about personalizing your subject line is just make sure that it sounds right. And one of the things you don't want to do is add the personalization at the very end of the subject line as though it were an afterthought. And I have seen that before. The other thing is if you have a long subject line, that could get cut off and then the personalization isn't going to be there anyway. You can do, excuse me, you can do a call to action. That's what CTA is. I probably should have put that in there in full words instead of acronym, versus a description of the offer. So the examples I have here is catch the Giants take on the Dodgers starting Friday versus Red Sox ticket discounts available. The first one is a call to action, catch the Giants this Friday. The second one is more of a description of the offer. There is a discount available if you want to purchase those. You can also test your subject line based on the audience. So you might want to have something more specific for your engaged audience versus your non-responders or versus leads, people who maybe haven't committed to your company yet, they haven't purchased or downloaded or whatever you consider a conversion. So you can certainly do that. And you can also have a sense of urgency. You can test a sense of urgency in the subject line and see if that helps with people opening the email. So you could have something like sale through the weekend versus sale ends Sunday, which gives people an idea that they have to hurry, or 2-day sale only. So you can test which one works better for your recipients if a sense of urgency gets them to open your email. So some more things that you can test for your open rate. The frequency of your send. So for example, if you're currently mailing once a month and you're finding you're sending out enormous emails, you can test splitting your email up and doing it twice a month. If you mail once a quarter, you can test versus sending it out once a month. There's an asterisk next to this, because the one thing that I would caution you about on changing the frequency of the send, especially if this is part of what people see when they sign up to be on your mailing list, it says we're going to mail once a month. Changing the frequency of the send can impact your subscribers, and it could cause them to be annoyed and want to unsubscribe. So especially this time of year when people's inboxes are being flooded with emails for the holidays, if you do plan on testing frequency of this send, I would just put a little note in the email saying that you're thinking about changing how often you're sending your email, and then maybe see if there's any feedback that your recipients give you on that, or just let them know, especially if you're going to be changing frequency of the send for this time of year, just let them know that it's going to be a short length of time. But if you're testing and you want to increase it to more than what you're currently doing, I would just put a little blip at the top of the email, just letting them know that you're testing the frequency of the send, and then they can give you some feedback on that. You can test the day and the time excuse me, that you send your email. And I did mention this a little bit earlier. Generally speaking, the most common times of the week to send out email is Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. The reason for that is most people read their email when they're at work, and generally those are the days that people are there. If somebody's going to take a day off, it's usually going to be a Monday or Friday to extend their weekend. So that's why emails are sent out on those days, because that's when people will be more likely to read them. But the day that you send your email really will depend on the type of business that you're sending to and your audience. So this could be something that you can test. We'll tell you the most common day is to send an email on a Wednesday, but maybe your audience will respond on a different day. And one of my favorite stories to tell, and I tell this at webinars frequently, so you might have heard this, but I was talking to one of our customers once, and we were talking about this. She was asking me when most people send out their emails and what the results are and things like that. And she said that she had tested sending out her email on a Friday, which isn't a day we would normally recommend. But she found with her business type and her audience, sending her email on a Friday, her recipients would open it on Saturday morning while they were drinking their coffee, and she found that she had more sales that way. Now, that isn't something that we would necessarily know. We don't know the habits of your recipients, but you do, and these are people who are engaged in what your business is doing. So this is why it's a great idea to test when you send out your email. You can also test the time of the day that you send. Generally speaking, you want your email to arrive around mid-morning or late afternoon. Again, you want it to get there after people have deleted all the spam from their inbox so that your email stands out, which is kind of why mid-morning is a good time to send it. And late afternoon, again, people come back from lunch, clean out their inbox, and they can see your email arrive. But again, if you're targeting people who aren't necessarily reading their email at work, then you might want to test a different time of the day as well. You can also test your from label. Generally, we recommend the company name because that is what your recipients will usually recognize more than they would recognize a person's name. And that's usually who they've signed up with. They've signed up with your company, not necessarily a person. And the company name is probably most recognizable. And since this will impact your open rate, again, this is something you can test and see which one works better for you. You can also test pre-header text. And if you're not familiar with pre-header text is the information that shows up after your subject line in the inbox. And not all email programs show pre-header text, but some of them do. And it's basically the first line of text in your email. So pre-header should be something that that goes with and supports your subject line, but not a repeat of your subject line. So you can have the same subject line and then test what your pre-header text says and see if that helps get your open rate to be higher on something different than just the subject line. So let's start taking a look at some examples of all of these things that I've just been talking about. So this is a subject line test that we did here. February is Vertical Response's anniversary. And so this past February was our 10th anniversary, and our team was wondering if having a mysterious vertical response gift would perform better than just saying what the offer was. So this is just a direct offer, description of the offer here on the left-hand side. Get 50% off email credits up to 1,000. And on the right-hand side is the one that sounded a little more mysterious. Get your VR 10th birthday 10th birthday gift. Other than the subject line, all the rest of the content of the email was exactly the same. So this is just the subject line that we changed. And so the one that had the best performance was get 50% off email credits up to 1,000. We had a 3.8% lift in open rate. And amazingly, 45% more revenue, even though the content was exactly the same. I think the reason that the revenue was higher on this particular one is that the subject line got people thinking right away, here's a great deal and I need to buy credits. Whereas the subject line on the right-hand side wasn't really talking about buying credits, so it wasn't in their minds yet, even though they had the exact same offer in that email. So this is a subject line test from Which Test Won. And version A and version B say the same thing, but you notice, I hope, that the difference between the two subject lines is that version B, the one on the right-hand side, is in all caps, and version A is the way you would normally write a subject line. Doing all caps in a subject line is one of those things that we would recommend not doing for a couple of reasons. One, it's not very good internet etiquette. That's yelling online, having everything in caps, and so yelling at your recipients isn't a great way to go. Plus, you know, if you have a word that might be something that spam filters don't like and it's all in caps, it could cause delivery issues if there's some other things along the way. But it could definitely flag your email as potential spam if you have all caps. So this company did a test on how their subject lines were. And the interesting thing is the one that won was version B. It had 13.8% more opens and 30% more clicks within the email. Again, you just never know what people are going to do. So it's definitely something we would not recommend normally is putting all caps, but for this particular audience and this mailing list, having all caps in the subject line definitely got their attention. So now that we've tested our open rates, we can take a look at testing click-through rates. So open rates and click-through rates are probably the things people test the most because, again, this is a measure of engagement, and so it shows you how interested people are in your email and your company. So you can test the call to action in your email. So you can do things like testing a link, so like a text link versus a button. You can test the placement of your call to action. So generally, you would want your call to action to be what we would call above the fold, so near the top of your email before your recipients start to scroll. But maybe you have something compelling at the bottom of your email that your recipients go to, and you might want to put your call to action there. Maybe you want to put it in the middle of the email. So those are some of the things you can test in the placement of your call to action. You can also test the number of CTAs. More than one might be more effective for your recipients. Repetition is a pretty effective marketing tool. People see things more than one time and it gets into their mind and they start doing what you want them to do. So having the call to action in your email more than once could be more effective for your recipients. The one thing I would caution on this is that you don't want to do too many different call to actions. You know, maybe you have people signing up for something or downloading something or buying something. If you have too many of them, your recipients will get confused as to what it is that you want them to do. So try to limit how many different actions you have. Just change the number of times you're asking them to do the action you want them to do. You can also test the text that you use for your button or for your links or for your call to action. And I have some examples of all of these things for you. The first one is on this slide here. So one of the things that we tested almost 2 years ago, I think, in our newsletter was using text links versus buttons. So you can see on the right-hand side of my screen here, we have a Find Out More button at the top. And under it, we have the text link that says Find Out More. So we wanted to know what our recipients responded to better. And in our test, we found out the buttons had a 26% increase in click-through rates. And again, this is our audience. Your audience may or may not respond the same way. But buttons really are compelling, and people just feel like they have to click on them. So including call to action buttons in your email is a great way to help increase your click-through rate. We have an easy tool to help make buttons. If you go to buttons.verticalresponse.com, you can create your own call to action buttons. You can have them say whatever you want. They can be whatever color you want. It's free, and then you can use them in your email, so you can have them do whatever you want with those. Also, another thing to keep in mind with call to action buttons is if your recipients are reading their email on a cell phone or a handheld device like that, buttons are a lot easier to click on than links are. So including call to action buttons for at least whatever you think is really important is an easy way for your cell phone readers to do what you want them to do as well. So once we found out that our recipients like clicking on buttons, we decided to test the color of the buttons. So the emails were exactly the same. The content was the same. All we did was change the button color. So on the top we have the green one, and on the bottom we have the blue one. And in our test, we found out that the green button had more click-through, so 10.5% click increase, and the green button email had twice the revenue of the blue button email. So I think the reason this one was successful is that part of our color scheme for vertical response, part of our logo is blue, and I think the green button stood out a little bit more. Also, especially the way we set up the different articles, we have links. We have a link at the top there you can see of the article, plus we have 2 other links, and those are blue, so it really made the green button stand out more. We also tested the text that we put on the buttons. And on our team, our marketing team, we assumed that having something that said download might be a little bit scary for some of our recipients. Some people are afraid of getting a virus or something like that if they download something from the internet. So we were using the phrase get the guide. And we decided to test it out and see if what our theory was actually correct. So we tested download the guide versus get the guide. And it turns out we were wrong. Download wasn't as scary as we thought. So the download the guide button had a 2% click-through increase, and that version had 43% more revenue for some reason. The content was the same, just the button was more compelling apparently. So here's another test from Which Test One. This company tested a couple things, which, as I said, I wouldn't generally recommend. They tested a new layout for their email, so like a new template that they were using, and they tested a call to action button. So really what I'm highlighting here is the button. So if you look at the top, test A, there's a link that says read the white paper. Test B is a big red button. So I'm sure you're thinking now you know which one won on this one. And after all of the stuff we've talked about already, you would probably be right. The big red button was the winner. For this company, it had a 25% increase over the link. Now, this is a big red button, and that is something that, again, will be really compelling for people to want to click on. So again, testing your buttons and what your buttons say is a great way to change your click-through rate as well. So in addition to the things we talked about, you can also test your content in your email and see what your recipients respond to, find out what they can get to so you can track where they're clicking, things like that. You can test having long copy versus short copy. And again, we generally recommend that you use shorter copy in your email because people's attention spans are fairly short, and it's hard to read a lot on a monitor because monitors aren't really conducive to reading. So generally what we recommend is having shorter copy and then having a link that clicks through to the website to read more if people are interested. But you can test that and see what your recipients respond to. You can test having testimonials in your email. And again, testimonials are great. Some people really respond to them, but your recipients may not be responding to testimonials. So you can test not having testimonials as well. As I mentioned on the previous slide, the test that company had done, you can test your email layout. And this is something we're doing right now in one of our newsletters that we send out. We're testing placement of different content in the email in different areas and seeing which has more engagement and which part has more engagement. You can also test your template, the type of template that you have, which may or may not make it easier for your recipients to get to the information you have for them. And you can even test different graphics in your email and see if your recipients respond to something different in your email as well, which is what this next example is. So this is another one of our emails that we did some testing on, and our creative team created two really cute sale icons or sale images, and we didn't know which one to use, so we ended up testing the two of them. So on these two different emails, the subject line is exactly the same. And what we tested was the graphics. So the one on the top right has a red graphic that has what the offer is on the graphic itself. It says buy 5,000 email credits and get 2,500 free. The one on the bottom left has the sale in the balloons, and then the button icon to the left of that has what the deal is. So we tested what the offer was. The link in both emails was the same, and the discount and the savings was the same. It was just presented slightly differently. So in this one, hopefully you're guessing right now which one you think won. So the winner for the content was this one. The open rates were the same, which would be expected. The subject lines were the same. But this one had 24% more clicks and 21% more revenue. And I would attribute that to the fact that the image has the offer on it. The other one, although I love the balloon graphic, it's really cute with the balloons that say sale on them. This one says exactly what the offer is. It's really clear. There's no way to be confused by what this is. So I think this is the reason this one won, was because it was very clear what the offer was. So you can also test conversions, and conversions will depend on what your company considers a conversion, and everyone's is different. Well, not everyone's, but most people consider a conversion if somebody's made a purchase. If you're not actually selling something, your idea of conversion could be different. If they've made a donation to your organization, if they've used your service, maybe they've downloaded a white paper. Whatever you consider a conversion, you can also test the change in conversions as well. So you can do things, especially if you're selling, that makes it a little easier for conversions. Excuse me. You can test, as I said, a % off versus a dollar amount. And as I said, we've done some tests on our own customers and found dollars is a much clearer offer for them. But sometimes % off is a good thing to test as well. You could test things like free versus reduced versus complimentary, so how you're phrasing your offer. And you can also test having a time limit in your email for your offer. So I have some screenshots here. So we have like a today only. That's the one in the top right. That's definitely got a time limit, and there's a promo code there. The middle graphic has $1 off for spending certain amounts of money on there. And again, you could test versus a % off on those dollar prices. And the bottom of the bottom left one has say 15% off your purchase. So you can test those different types of offers in your email and see which one your recipients respond to. We also did a conversion test. This was earlier in the year. We have an email that we send out to people who have set up accounts, but they haven't activated the accounts yet, to try to encourage them to activate their account. So we did two different tests. The first one was, this one where we asked people to activate their account, and if they activated the account and then liked vertical response on Facebook, they would get 50% off their first purchase of email credits. The second email that we sent to them was an email that asked them to activate their account, and that is all this email does. It says, activate your account in the subject line, in the pre-header text. There's 2 links that say that, and there's a call to action button that says that. And that's the only thing this email offered, was to activate the account. So have you guys think for a second which one you think was successful, A or B? So the winner was B. The one that did not have any type of offer had 32% more opens and clicks, 20% more activations, which is what we were looking for with this particular email, and the majority of the clicks came from this image right here. So this, again, was a surprise for us. We thought offering a deal would help encourage our recipients to activate their accounts, and really it just needed to be a straight to the point ask. We just needed to ask them to activate their account, and that's what was more effective. And again, this is for our mailing list and our customers. Your customers might respond better to having a % off, and that, again, is something that you can test. So once you've done all of this testing of your email, the best way to find out how successful your email was is to compare your results. And so once you've sent out your emails, your dashboard is the place to go to take a look at how your email did. And you can compare a lot of things from your email. So the dashboard itself will give you specific information for each email. So you can see your opens and your clicks. You can see any revenue if you're using our ROI calculator. That will be part of the reporting. You can see the purchases that are being made through the email. You can also, once you've sent out your different email tests, is compare them. So once you click on one of your emails and then click on reports, you can set up a comparison of whatever email. So you can compare your split test that you've done and see which was more successful. You can see which had higher open rate, which had higher click-through rate. And again, this is something that you want to continue to track and see how things are doing over time. Once you find something that your recipients respond to, then you want to stick with that until it doesn't work anymore. Eventually, whatever your recipients are responding to, they'll get used to seeing it, and it won't be quite as effective. So once that starts happening, then you can try testing again. And as I've said a couple times today, different audiences react differently. So some of the things that work from the test that I showed you today for us may not necessarily work for your recipients. Again, we have different audiences, but it's fun to test, and it's interesting to see how people respond. Like I said, we always think, oh, people are going to respond this way. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, and that's some of the fun in testing and finding out what people really do respond to. You don't want to stop testing. Again, it's something that you can keep doing to keep your email, to keep giving what your recipients want in your email. And keep it fresh. Again, it's an easy thing to keep adding something different in your email, testing something different in your email. Your recipients don't know you're testing, so it's something that makes it kind of fun for you and interesting for them as well. So hold on just a second here. I am going to bring up my account here. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of using our segmentation tool, and then I'll start taking your questions. So in your vertical response account, under lists in the blue navigation bar is segments. And the segmentation tool can be used to break up your lists into different pieces for whatever reason that you want. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click New Segment. And I'm going to give it a name. You can call it anything you like. And you can even do a description here if someone else is going to need to look at this. Now here is the fun part. You get to decide how you want to create your list. And there's a lot of different reasons you would use the segmentation tool to break up your list. I'm going to show you how to do A/B split tests. But you can use the segmentation tool to create a more targeted email. So maybe you want to start sending emails to the people who are really engaged, so the people who open and click on the links in your email. Maybe for the holidays you want to send them a special offer. So you can use the segmentation tool to create that mailing list. You can also use the segmentation tool if you're having an event and you want to invite people who are in a certain area. If you have that information in your list, you can use the segmentation tool to break it up based on that. You can also use the segmentation tool if you're using our opt-in form, for example, if people are expressing different interests. So maybe you're a winery and people say that their favorite wine is Chardonnay. You can use the segmentation tool to create a mailing list of people who like Chardonnay. If it's in the mailing list, you can use the segmentation tool to create a new list using that data. And you can also use the segmentation tool to create a list based on campaign responses. And I'll actually show you how to do that in a minute. So let me show you how to do an A/B split test, which for the most part is how you're going to split your list for the things that I just talked about today. So you're going to select segment list members only, and then you're going to click Save and Build Segment. And then you're going to select the list that you're mailing to. And you can select more than one list. If you're mailing to more than one list, you can do that. Click Done. Now, if there's something specific that you want to split based on in the content of your list, you would set it up here. Since what we're doing is an A/B split test, you don't really need to set up a filter. But you would do this if you were creating a list of people who were in a certain area or people who like Chardonnay. This would be creating a list based on data in your list. But we're just splitting the list right now. I'm going to click Save and Get Results. And then this is going to give me a preview. If everything looks good, go ahead and click Save Results. And this is where you get to split up your list. So it's going to show you how many addresses are in your list. And then you can either have a single list, which we don't need to do, or multiple lists. So we're doing an A/B split test, so we're going to do multiple lists. And we're going to split it in half. So we need two lists. That's the A and the B in that. And then you can break up your list based on whatever percentage. So for an A/B split test, that would be 50-50. And then our system will create this list of random addresses. Now, if you wanted to do 70-30, like I gave in one of my examples, if you wanted to do something a little easier, you could. You just change the percent here. If you wanted to do something like 80-10-10, as I had in one of my examples, you can do that as well. So I would do 80. And it's keeping track of what your percent is, which is why I keep getting that red there. So you would do that. So if you wanted more than two lists, you would do that. Again, you don't really want to go beyond this number because the numbers will start getting a little diluted if you have your list too small. I'm going to go back to 2 here. So this will be my A/B split test. This is going to be the name of my list. So it takes the segment name and then it puts a number, but you can change the list name to whatever you want it to be. And then click Create List. So if I go view my mailing lists, here we go. So these are my 2 lists that I just created. So they're randomly split, and now I can do a test of my emails. And again, you can do this however often you want to. It's just creating a new list for you. And just to show you really quickly, besides splitting your list based on list data, you can also create a list of responses from your emails. So from this point, you would click Segment Campaign Recipients, click Save and Build Segment, and then instead of selecting a list on this step, you're going to select the emails. So what is really nice about this is you can create a mailing list based on just about anything from your campaign results. So you could create a list of people who opened these 3 emails, or if they clicked, and you can select even a specific link. So if you wanted to create a mailing list based on a certain link in your email, you can do that. Opens, you can do any of them, or you could do within a specific date range. So if you wanted people who'd open your email over the last 3 months, you would set that up here, select the specific date range, and then that would pull in people who opened your email then. You could also do converted, so if they made a purchase through your email. You can also do did not open or did not click or did not convert. So maybe you want to send a different targeted message to those people. So this way you can create a mailing list that's specific to the responses from your emails, and it can be over however many emails and length of time that you would like to use. So it can make a really targeted list for you as well. So that's a quick look at how our segmentation tool works. It's in your account and it's free to use. I definitely recommend you go take a look at that, and it's kind of fun to play with. So I'm going to put this resources slide up here, and then I will start taking your questions. I mentioned which test won, and I had a couple examples from that. If you go to this website, you can sign up for the weekly email, and it is free, and you can play the little game we played today, guessing what is successful. It also gives you ideas on things that you can test, because you can see what other people have been testing and how successful those different tests were. And sometimes it's also website content, but since website content, like buttons and what is said is pretty much the same thing as an email. You can easily apply that to what's going on in your email. Our blog has lots of information, and there's even a couple of posts on some of the things that I talked about today. I think we have like 2 blog posts on some of the testing that we've done. So it's a great resource if you want to go check that out. We also have some guides on our guides page. The easiest way to get there, instead of writing down this really long URL, is go to our website, verticalresponse.com, click on resources, and then you'll see guides. The guides are free, and there's one called Testing2011, which will take you through some of the things to test in your email and how to do that. Email Marketing Reporting Basics is a guide that will help you understand your responses to your email. So you can find out what is an average open rate, what's an average click-through rate, and then there's some tips on there on how to make those better. So that's something that a lot of people like, and it's a good way to get started before you start testing your email to see what might be something in store for you. And there's also a guide called Savvy Subject Line Writing for Success. And you probably noticed there was an entire slide on what you can test in your subject lines, because subject lines are very important. It is what gets people to open your email, so we do have a guide on that. And then, as I mentioned, we have a button site where you can make your own call to action buttons. You can put these in your email or on your blog or website or whatever, and it's free to set them up. Just go to buttons.verticalresponse.com and you'll be able to do that.